The wind that swept across Redemption Creek that morning carried more than dust. It carried whispers. From the porch of the general store to the swinging doors of the saloon, the whole town was buzzing about the woman on the afternoon stagecoach. No one had seen her yet, but everyone already had a story to tell. They said she was a city girl come to marry Eli Carter, the man whose ranch stretched farther than the eye could see, whose cattle were the pride of 2 counties, and whose name carried as much weight as the sheriff's badge. By the time the coach rolled into town, the air was thick with curiosity. The wheels screeched to a stop, and a hush fell over the gathered crowd. Out stepped a slender woman in a travel-worn blue dress, her gloved hands gripping a battered suitcase. Her brown hair, once carefully pinned, had loosened from the long journey, and her green eyes darted nervously across the unfamiliar faces staring at her. She spotted him immediately. Eli Carter, leaning against the post near the livery. Hat pulled low, shoulders broad, eyes like storm clouds ready to break. He was exactly as she remembered from his letters. Steady, serious, the kind of man who worked hard and spoke little. For months, they had exchanged words across miles of paper and longing. His letters were simple but warm, written by a man who wanted not just a wife, but a partner. She stepped forward, heart thudding. "Mr. Carter?" He straightened slowly, his eyes taking her in. "Miss Jennings?" Her smile wavered under the weight of his stare. "Yes, sir. Clara Jennings. It's an honor to finally meet you." He didn't answer right away. Around them, a few of the onlookers began whispering, low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "That's her," someone muttered from the porch. "The woman from St. Louis. I heard she worked in a saloon," another hissed. "Miss Lillian's house, they say." Clara froze. The words hit her like stones. She thought she'd left those rumors behind, buried in the city she ran from. But small towns had a way of sniffing out secrets faster than wildfire. Eli's jaw tightened. He had heard the same whispers weeks ago, rumors that she had once worked in a place no decent woman should. He had written her with hope, imagining a quiet, kind soul to share his home with, not a woman tangled in a past like that. "Is it true?" he asked finally, his voice low, almost rough. Her throat tightened. "Eli, please, things aren't what they seem. Just tell me, Clara." She swallowed hard. "I worked there, yes, but not the way people say. After my husband died, I had nothing. Miss Lillian gave me a room, food, and a job cleaning. I never—" He held up a hand, cutting her off. "You should have told me." "I was going to," she whispered. "I just thought, maybe out here I could start again. That my past didn't have to follow me." The silence that followed was brutal. The murmurs grew louder, and Eli's face hardened like stone. His pride, his reputation, the eyes of the town, all of it pressed down on him, until his voice came out cold as the steel of his spurs. "I can't do this," he said simply. "I can't marry you." She blinked, her breath catching in her chest. "Eli, you wrote to me for months. I said a lot of things before I knew the truth," he interrupted, his tone final. "I can't bring a woman with that kind of past onto my ranch. Folks here don't forget easy. Redemption Creek's got its name for a reason, but it don't hand out second chances to everyone." Her fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase. For a moment she looked as if she might argue, but then something inside her broke. Not the soft kind of breaking, but the silent, deep kind that no one can hear but the person it happens to. "I see," she said softly. "Then I'll be on my way." She turned, boots crunching in the dirt as she walked down the main street. The coach driver looked at her with pity, but she shook her head. She couldn't bear another ride, couldn't face another round of stares and whispers. Eli stood there watching her leave, his chest tight, but his pride louder than his heart. Around him, townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to watch. Clara walked until the town was nothing but a blur behind her. By the time she reached the edge of the hills, the sun had dipped low, painting the world in copper and gold. She sat on her suitcase and let the tears come, quiet and bitter. That night, she found refuge in the old church at the outskirts of town, a place abandoned since the preacher left years ago. The pews were covered in dust, and the cross above the altar leaned crooked, but it was dry, and it was hers. She lit a single candle and whispered a prayer she wasn't sure anyone would hear. Days passed. The town forgot her as easily as they'd judged her. She picked up small chores for the widow Martha Briggs, who lived near the river. Martha, kind-eyed and stubborn, didn't ask questions. She just handed Clara bread and told her she could use the old church until she found better. But better never came. The nights grew colder, and the loneliness heavier. Every time Clara saw riders pass toward Carter Ranch, she looked away. She told herself she didn't care, that she'd move on soon. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw Eli's face, the way he looked at her like she was something dirty. Then came the night the sky split open with thunder. Clara had just finished patching one of Martha's quilts when she saw the orange glow on the horizon. It flickered, pulsing like a heartbeat. The wind shifted and the smell hit her, smoke. She ran outside, her heart pounding. In the distance, over the ridge, the Carter Ranch was burning. Without thinking, she grabbed a bucket and ran. The rain had started to fall, but the wind drove the flames wild. When she reached the ranch, the scene was chaos. Men shouting, horses screaming, Eli's voice hoarse as he fought to save his barn. "Stay back!" he yelled when he saw her. "It's too dangerous." But Clara didn't stop. She soaked a cloth in the trough, tied it around her face, and charged toward the stables. Inside, smoke choked the air, and the heat felt like it would melt her skin. She could hear the terrified whinnies of horses trapped inside. She opened one stall, then another, leading them out through the haze. Her lungs burned, her dress caught fire at the hem, but she beat it out and kept going. There was one left, a foal cowering in the corner. She could barely see, barely breathe, but she reached for it, whispering softly, "It's all right, little one. I've got you." By the time she stumbled out, clutching the shaking foal in her arms, the ranch hands were cheering, shouting her name. Eli ran forward, catching her as she collapsed into his arms. Her skin was hot, her voice weak. "You fool," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You could have died. But the horses," she gasped. "They didn't deserve to burn." She passed out before he could say another word. When dawn came, the fire was out. The barn was gone, but the herd was safe. Word spread fast. How the woman Eli Carter rejected had risked her life to save his ranch. For the first time, the whispers in Redemption Creek weren't cruel. They were awed. But for Eli, the sound of them brought no comfort, only a deep, aching regret. Because in one night, the woman he'd cast aside had shown more courage and heart than any soul he'd ever known, and he would soon learn that what he'd lost that day would change not just his life, but the fate of the whole town. The morning after the fire, Redemption Creek woke to the smell of damp ash and quiet awe. Smoke still hung over the valley like a ghost that refused to leave, and the blackened remains of Carter Ranch told a story the town would talk about for years. The horses grazed nervously on the hillside, safe but shaken. Eli Carter sat on the porch, bandaged hands resting on his knees, staring at the empty space where his barn used to be. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara stumbling through the flames, her face streaked with soot and stubborn courage. The woman he had cast out had saved everything he loved. When the doctor rode out that morning, Eli met him halfway down the path. "How is she?" he asked. The doctor wiped his brow. "She'll live. Smoke in the lungs, a few burns. She's tougher than she looks." Eli nodded, his chest tightening. "Where is she now?" "At the old church," the doctor said. "That widow, Mrs. Briggs, took her there to rest. She refused to come to town." Eli hesitated, shame tangled with something heavier inside him, something he didn't want to name yet. He'd been raised to believe a man's word was his bond, his judgment final. But what kind of man turned away someone brave enough to face a fire for him? Eli found himself at the church more often than not, bringing supplies, fixing doors, anything to justify being near her. Sometimes they talked about small things, sometimes about the fire, but most of the time he just watched her. The way she moved through the world now, gentle but sure, unafraid of the same people who had once scorned her, left him speechless. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, He found her sitting on the steps again, the sky painted in amber and rose. "I heard you took in that boy from the saloon," he said. She nodded. "Tommy. He was stealing bread from the store. I couldn't let them throw him out. He reminds me of myself when I had no one." Eli sat beside her, the boards creaking under his weight. "You've changed this town, Clara." She looked at him, her green eyes glinting in the fading light. "No, Eli, the town changed itself. It just needed someone to remind it how." He was quiet for a long time. Then, with a deep breath, he said, "You were right that day, when you said you just wanted a fresh start. I should have seen that. I judged you before I even knew you.